name's Habs. I'm an engineering lead at Uni London, also a manager, and I'm going to talk to you today about why you should stop calling it technical debt and actually listen to your engineers. We're going to start with a small introduction before I talk at you for 40 minutes so that you can get to know me a little bit. To kick off, here is a very random and very normal photo of me and my family in Scotland. Speaks for itself, I think. My name is Habs, short for Haben. It means beautiful river in Korean, which is obviously a very sweet sentiment, except my parents didn't really anticipate the translation of, putting together the words ha and bin when we moved to the UK. So it went down a treat in the playground. Habs is much easier to pronounce. You can call me Habs. I did think it was easy until someone a few weeks ago thought my name was Carbs. So that was a first. I live in London with my partner and my new tabby kitten. And coincidentally, her middle name is Tabin, which is definitely a coincidence, I swear. So a little bit about me. I studied sculpture. I used to make digital installations. I worked with ice, latex, metalwork, woodwork, anything that was basically cheap and accessible. And after 4 years of being covered in sawdust and burning off my fingers and giving my all, also paying £36,000 in fees, I decided I wanted absolutely nothing to do with fine art anymore. The bright side of my degree was that I got to work with small electronics, so Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. I had studied computing at school, but it was really cool to basically discover coding in a new form. So that was great. And afterwards, I went to Makers Academy, which is a coding bootcamp in London. So you learn full stack development, XP values. It was kind of everything you would expect from what you imagine when you think of a coding bootcamp. The most cult-like environment I've ever been a part of. For example, we used to have weekly emotional intelligence sessions with the Chief Joy Officer, which was and still is a real role. We would all sit around in a circle and hold hands and, share something really deep and emotional, and we'd all clap for each other after. And yeah, I can say that for certain it 100% had nothing to do with improving my coding skills at all. And yeah, alumni used to walk back into the building at Makers, so people that had graduated from the boot camp, and everyone would cheer and scream and clap. It was like Beyonce was walking into the building. And I thought it was totally stupid until I got to go back and give a talk, and I bathed in the pure pride of it. So a bit about my experience. I worked at various startups for like 6-7 years, all fast-paced, all between like Series A and Series B as a front-end engineer. I have worked for do-it-for-me website builder services, fintech, insurtech, and I've worked with Vue, React, TypeScript. I've actually met Evan Yu and managed to spill not one, but 3 drinks on myself at a React conference. And I was sober, I promise. I worked previously at Marshmallow, which is a full insurer where we sold car insurance, and I worked on the growth team, so I was the first engineer on the growth team, and it's quite cool to know that right now that team still stands and it's 15 engineers. We focused on new customer acquisition, a lot of A/B testing, and growing out the lead form for increasing conversion. In my second week at Marshmallow, the conversion was so bad. So one of the comparison websites was going to switch us off, and we had 3 days to fix it. And I mean, this lead form was disgusting. I wouldn't want anyone to be subjected to having to work on what I did. We had 3 days to change around the conversion. So it ended up being me and an engineer, and we worked late nights 3 days in a row. And it resulted on me on a Friday night at 3 a.m. on a Zoom call with this brilliant engineer. He was really, really talented, but I was on a Zoom call with him in a shower gown playing the kazoo to me while we were waiting for things to build. And I really contemplated my life choices. But, they say your 20s are your best years, so there's that. We managed to turn around the conversion pretty quickly from a whopping 3 to 8% in a few days, which kind of speaks for how bad the code was. And the comparison sites kept us on. And in my time at Marshmallow, we became the UK's first Black-owned unicorn. So it was really cool to be part of a very high-growth company and see kind of what comes after all the foundational technical improvements to legacy code. sorry. Yeah, and also, reaping the benefits of what comes after you go from like a startup to a scale up, mainly going from tap water to sparkling water in a tap, which was elite. So right now I'm at Trinity London. Trinity London have been coming for, I think, 4 years now. Actually, if you look at your lanyards, if you're not a speaker, there is a photo of the whole team here last year on the cards. But Trinity London is, I think if there are any millennials in the crowds, if you remember Trini Susanna from What Not to Wear, Trini Woodall is the CEO of the company, and we sell makeup and skincare online and in-store. We really care about women of all ages and helping them feel their best selves. I lead the e-commerce team, so everything to do with our online offering. We proudly don't use Shopify, and we're totally headless. We have warehouses in the UK and Australia and lots of retail stores. If anyone is like in London soon, we have a pop-up on King's Road in Chelsea that I really think you should all try and come down to. And maybe we'll get you some discounted products as well if you message me. We have a brilliant engineering team at Trinity London. We have a team of 32 people, and within the ecom team, we don't use story points, we use Kanban, and we don't use sprints. We have a very fluid way of working that has worked for us for probably the last 6 months. I also started managing in January, so I managed 6 engineers, and it's been the best but most challenging part of my career. I'm sure anyone else that made that transition to management can relate to that. It's been amazing though to have the opportunity to work with the people side more and like helping to grow engineers and help them find career fulfillment, and also offering kind of coaching and pastoral support. I think throughout my career I've had really influential managers that have helped me grow really quickly, so it's great to have the opportunity to give back. My role is an enablement role, so I look at technical scoping and speeding up the planning of projects, making sure that things get delivered. I really care about actually finishing projects rather than just starting a load of them. And I make sure that my team delivers to e-commerce targets and commercial numbers, and focusing on the team basically being happy and ensuring delivery. So I am sure a lot of you have seen this meme. I'm going to talk to you about technical debt today and why I hate the term technical debt, and also why you should listen to your engineers more. I'm obviously biased, having been an engineer, but I wanted to kind of bridge that gap between technical and non-technical people in teams. Just curious, how many people in this room are in like Agile coach roles or delivery manager or Scrum Master roles? Could you put your hand up? Okay, cool. Thank you. I am well aware that I am not an Agile coach and I'm doing a business agility talk, so please don't flog me, not yet. I wanted to kind of share some of my learnings from going from being an IC and then trying to operate teams as a lead, and hopefully, you'll give me a chance to do that even though I'm not an Agile coach. Even though I've had a relatively short career compared to a lot of the very experienced people we have talking Agile on the beach this year, I think with my experience, I've been on the ground and lived through a lot of kind of engineering life cycles. So a lot of the very common things, there's a lot of startups experience when you go from legacy code and what comes after. So I've now built 4 component libraries from scratch, integrating backends with front ends, rewriting lead forms, V2, V3, all within a company before it hits the 5-year mark. It's very repetitive, and every company I learn something different, which is why I wanted to have this talk. It was only 2 years ago that I was an individual contributor and on the ground coding every day. And I think once I switched to being a lead and dealing with stakeholders more directly, and forward planning and kind of my goals being more commercially motivated, there was a huge change in my view around technical debt. So I hope that this kind of dual viewpoint will maybe teach you something new today. Also, Trini London is the first company that I've worked for that is not tech first. So it's been an incredibly humbling experience and tested my ability to communicate to non-technical stakeholders. But yeah, that's the plan for today. There'll be some time at the end for any questions, so let's get started. First things first, stop calling it technical debt. This talk is for anyone. I didn't want to specify it. I wanted to make it accessible, so there's tidbits in there for engineers, for product, and learnings for everyone to take back to your teams. When I talk about technical debt, I'm talking about everything from technical improvements to debt that is incurred for moving fast and building features, and anything that's kind of delayed. We will discuss why I hate the term and why it makes me angry, why business value and risk are important, how to calculate business value, and then we'll package up some takeaways and exercises for everyone to take back to their teams. So let's get started. So a few months ago at a tech day, I ran a session called WTF Technical Debt ? Exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark. You get the gist. And this is a board where we ask, what is it and what are the other names, and ask people to just quick fire suggest. So we've got some classics in there. Paying down for the future, organizational debt, rainy day ticket. My personal favorite is all prod code. Considering my director of tech is here today. Sorry, Don, we're not talking about Trinity London, I swear. And then we've also got past me's not so great decisions. I am not sure we're talking about code there. And then we have can't be asked and pointless. Just brilliant. Yeah, Trinity London coming off really strong here. But I'd like to quickly put it to the group. Does anyone have any other names that they've heard to call, like what to call technical debt or a technical improvement?
Go faster, where?
Yeah, that's a classic. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I see it as a lack of pride in code.
Lack of pride, yeah, a lot of that. Sorry.
Something that stops you delivering value.
Yeah. I think all very valid and all, yeah. It's funny when you hear a lot of these terms because everyone, when you run a session, everyone nods their heads like, yeah, I've heard that before. Thank you. So you'll see a theme here, everything is around something that's been delayed or deemed as not urgent for now. And I've kind of seen that in every company I've worked at, that whenever a technical improvement ticket or kind of a bug ticket or anything is raised by engineers, it's already automatically kind of deemed as a technical improvement or tech debt, and that it isn't urgent now. And the assumption is that, it goes into the backlog, because it's written by someone that's technical, it automatically is grouped as tech debt. So some questions here that I wanted to ask the room, and please put your hand up if you answer yes to any of these. So the first one is, have you ever raised an urgent fix for an issue on production that didn't get picked up that day? I'm so sorry. Do you have a technical debt ticket in the backlog right now? Yeah, easy. Have you ever nuked the backlog but just got it built back up again? Yeah. Thanks, everyone. I feel your pain. Of course, that last one is a reference to Alan Kelly, who we love at Trinity London. There's a weird force field around tech debt or technical improvement tickets that it makes non-technical stakeholders just shy away, almost there's a label on it that says keep out for anyone that isn't an engineer. There's this kind of impression that there's a mystical language spoken by engineers that no one else can understand, or engineers don't want to share with them, which I hate that impression so much. It makes engineers look really, really bad. But also, actually, us engineers are even worse. Sometimes, if you come across a bug ticket or a technical improvement ticket or a big bit of tech debt work in an epic and you didn't raise it, and you aren't familiar with the code, you probably will do everything to avoid it because it's you assume it's too long or too horrible, basically just too boring, because you assume that it's a cleanup ticket. I have this amazing engineer in our team called Sachin, and he spent 3 days recently refactoring a component. And I had a catch up with him, and I said, oh, Sachin, how's it going? How's it going refactoring a component? And he just looked at me completely straight faced, like, it's so disgusting. I need to have a shower. It's horrible. And I feel like we can all relate to that. If you've ever had to refactor anything, it feels like a hill that you need to get over, but also you spend a lot of time telling everyone around you how horrible it is. You need to justify the pain and share the pain of it. But why is it so much easier to delay than to prioritize a tech debt ticket? I think very clearly because it's just toxic waste. I think anyone that's worked in tech longer than a month is kind of programmed to link the term tech debt with a negative response, usually avoiding eye contact with a big shudder and, most importantly, pretending like that's not how you feel about it. The issue with tech debt tickets is that they just enter a void and they never come out, and simply labeling something as tech debt or a technical improvement is just lazy. It's actually not enough for non-technical stakeholders to make decisions on what to prioritize, because often, tickets are raised in a rush with little detail, and the business value and risk have not been thought about at all. We need to start thinking about the risk of actually not doing the work, because risk is just another value piece. And the reality is we don't actually need to address all technical debt if the risk isn't high enough, and we don't need to do it now. No matter how important it is to you or the person that raised it, if it's not essential for now, we probably don't need to do it. And I think about this a lot in terms of my journey, because I think 2 years ago I would have raised some tech debt from being pressured to move fast and get a feature out. And I would feel so precious about that tech debt. I've seen the code, I've seen how disgusting it is. You can't forget about it. You go to sleep remembering and dreaming about that horrible component that you saw, and it's important to you to get it refactored. And I think I would have felt very precious and, felt like it was disastrous if it had been buried in the backlog again. But I think since then, I've learned to take a step back and consider the bigger picture of kind of what the impact is on the team and the company, and not just, for my own sanity. So we need to look at what will move the needle forward. And we also need to make the journey of whoever is reviewing the tickets easier. So we need to agree to put in more time to think about technical improvements and raising tickets with actually considered risk and value, and think about, what is actually going to be the immediate impact, and will there be one? So we've covered, the many names for technical debt, and I encourage you to think about the why. So why did a particular ticket get dumped into the backlog? So obviously, most of you raised your hands for all 3 questions earlier and asked these questions about the particular tickets that you're thinking about. And then eventually when a ticket did make it out of the backlog, why did it make it out? And we need to continue to question whether technical improvements are actually going to change anything immediate. In order for us to try to quantify the value of tech debt or technical improvements, we have to understand why business value and risk are important. I guarantee you that 90% of your backlog tickets have not got a defined value or risk statement if they're a technical improvement in your backlog right now. That is a money back guarantee, so come find me if that's not the case. But so in my role, I really care about retention. And I also know that from someone that's only worked at startups, and I wouldn't ever do anything different, because I love the ability to deliver big volumes of impact and grow my career very quickly and try out, wear lots of different hats. And I think that's really important to then make sure that your team feel invested in that as well. I want to make sure, my team and my reports are feeling happy and fulfilled at the company. But I want them to feel invested. I always say to everyone on my team, I want you to look back at the last month and think about the outcomes that you've achieved rather than the outputs. Otherwise, I kind of feel like unless you feel like you're driving a lot of value at a startup, there are a lot of pains. So, if you're not getting that, why are you really at that startup? And And I think on both a team and business level, we need to understand where we are delivering that value. So we want to grow the company, but alongside that, we need to make smarter decisions of where everyone is spending their time. Yeah. Why is future work so much easier to prioritize? It's new, it's shiny, it's glam. For us, we have a celebrity CEO, so she can visualize it. There's no way that we would bother trying to explain why refactoring a component is just as glamorous. Trying to communicate that with her would be impossible. And also, new features are far more tangible, rather than, for example, refactoring a component outside of a product and engineering team. It's very hard to justify spending time refactoring. And as I said, for individual contributors, you want to know that you're driving value that aligns with the company goals. For example, actually spending time, making a difference rather than spending a few weeks on working on small backlog tickets, maybe because, your PM was feeling generous that week and gave you a little ration of bug tickets. And yeah, as an engineer, I think it's quite demotivating to basically just be given a number of bug tickets based on the quantity rather than the quality of what addressing those bugs will deliver. I see that a lot with there'll be a sprinkling of bugs in each sprint just for the sake of it. But, as an engineer, it doesn't really make you feel like you've moved the needle much for the company. So another question for the room. Please raise your hand if I asked you about a project you're working on now, could you actually clearly define the impact it's going to have on company OKRs and trade numbers? Okay, all right. Thank you. I had a 0. Yeah, unless your engineers understand the greater impact of a piece of work they'll have, they'll question the purpose of it. It creates a really demotivating environment. I don't want to waste my time, I want to know that my time is valuable. Time is even more valuable as well at a startup, where you don't have that many developers, so what your developers spend time on is much more precious. And part of this is helping the people in your team understand company goals and arming them actually with OKRs and for everyone to own them. And I think a lot of the talks at this conference, we've heard a lot about psychological safety, which is really, really important. And we've spoke about it in terms of safety of, voicing your honest opinions and feeling safe in a room. But I think for me, I've also seen there is a lack of psychological safety when it comes to actually talking about company OKRs or company goals, especially for engineers who may not be in those conversations as much. And I think something that makes a really big difference is arming your team with sharing OKRs and trade numbers and the roadmap really regularly. You can't expect your engineers to care about company goals if they don't feel confident. And I think it's up to whoever is running the team to basically drive that and put in that time to arm your engineers with that kind of knowledge. Has an incident ever happened when a ticket you raised could have stopped it from happening? Please raise your hand. Yeah. I like all the little smiles as everyone raises their hand to that one. It's an I told you so moment. This has happened to me multiple times, and I wish I was as bold as Gina to get a t-shirt, maybe one day. It's infuriating to know that you identified a risk before it started, costing the company actual money and affecting customers, and it just feels like it's been careless planning and your voice hasn't been heard. It's a terrible feeling. But I think we need to take a step back and question whether we clearly defined the impact and risk of not doing the ticket. So did you, when you raised that ticket, make it as easy as possible for everyone to understand the problem? And this is something I see a lot. Engineering risks that are clear to the technical members or, a product and engineering team, but they're not written in plain English. and it immediately becomes inaccessible to justify that value to the rest of the company, spend time working on it. So it's really important to encourage engineers and your teams to take responsibility for this. Help them develop good communication skills to define the risk or predicted incident in simple terms that make sense basically to anyone. It also really helps to bridge the gap between, rather than it being engineers and then non-technical stakeholders, it bridges the gap and creates a group rather than having these like cut-off areas within teams, and creates more accessibility and trust if everyone feels comfortable with the language that they're speaking. And it's also just a great skill for individuals to develop during their tech careers, to be able to have that good communication. Obviously, as someone within engineering, I want to be able to create a culture of engineering excellence. I'm talking about company goals and stuff, but the thing that I really want is engineering excellence, and I will always be biased towards that. I want to be investing in quality and addressing high-risk issues and planning for the long term. But I think you need to be tactical there. You want to create infrastructure improvements and you've got your engineering vision, but you need to be tactical about how that aligns with the brand and the commercials. It's not to say that engineering excellence isn't important and that tech debt is not important. It's to say, let's package it up and sell it in a way that we can help other people in the rest of the company that are not engineers also buy into the importance of it. We've covered creating more focus, so helping everyone to make an impact and drive value, helping individuals to feel invested, and questioning how the tech debt itself is going to help reach company targets, whether it's from something not being done or something being done, and also to continue to push for engineering excellence. So we've spoken about why it's important. Let's now talk about how to understand and calculate value. So it's always good to start thinking about, what metrics your project or ticket will affect. So ask the right questions. Will it reduce page loads? What is the benefit of that in an engineering context? But then think about what is the actual notable benefit to the business that is actually measurable. We want to keep unwrapping each value statement until we reach one that is understood by everyone, not just the people in your team or not just the engineers in your team. And you should think about which metric will actually be affected and materially why that makes a difference to the company. So tech debt is often somewhat intangible to people that are non-engineers. Create all the steps and get to the point where you can make tech debt and the impact of it actually tangible. So an example is removing a third-party provider, moving something in-house is something we talk about a lot in the ecom team. For engineers, it's very clear. It's less maintenance of the provider. Maybe there are examples of the support of the third party just being really, really rubbish. And maybe, that integration was set up 2 years ago. It's not maintained, so it's just total spaghetti. Maybe in engineering, we're just spending time on something that is just really frustrating and it's just not nice, supporting that tool. Yeah, real talk, the business doesn't care. They don't care about that, because ultimately what the business cares about is, whether it'll save them money to move things in-house. Will it make any processes efficient by saving development time in the future? If so, by how much? And how much is actually going to cost the development team to make this change and maintain it going forward? Maybe moving something in-house will unlock other features that the company wants to do that are, more bright and shiny, and enable them to do more customization or, unblock a project that wasn't possible in the process. So I think definitely encourage your engineers to put themselves in the basically shoes of non-technical stakeholders and as the business, and make it as easy as possible to justify spending time on doing those changes. Maybe the third-party provider has been flaky and you've got real evidence and example of incidents. How often did those incidents occur? How much did it cost the company? What's the total development time it costs you to address those? And talk basically in the same language as the basically senior leadership at that point. And try and be as specific as you can, so lean on the data. what is actually going to happen once you have this tool, or what isn't going to happen. So I think a good value statement has a hypothesis of what a ticket, like what value a ticket will deliver. And, a great one has metrics. But I think a really, really good value statement has predictions with real numbers and metrics that the ticket will achieve. I think feedback is really important in improving this process. My advice is always to give feedback to individuals about the quality of tickets that they've raised. Definitely don't be shy about technical debt tickets that you might not understand. I mean, I see a lot of technical improvement and bug tickets that I just think, oh, what the hell is that? I don't know what that is, and I will sometimes lean on an engineer to explain it to me that has worked on that area. But I think the important thing here is to give feedback and open those conversations. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions around technical improvements. It will help your learning, and it will challenge whoever raised the ticket to actually improve their communication skills. We want to encourage everyone in the team when they're defining work to think about the overall impact and consider actually other projects and priorities. I really don't think we need to be super clinical around the roles of like a PM or an engineer or like a delivery manager. I think actually the best engineers I've worked with are those that are, actively considering and thinking about product and vice versa. And we need to kind of bridge that gap. And I think actually, Caitlin, we spoke about this earlier with like having a creative head, but then being able to, use that in engineering and encouraging, it's no longer around creativity being separate and that being, art and then engineering being separate. We need to encourage creative thinking within product management, within engineering. And I think, that will definitely be helpful. And we want to practice, obviously, calculating value ahead of projects. We don't want to wait until after the project is done to see the effect. So definitely continue to be data-driven in your decisions of which projects to develop. My advice is to develop your communication skills to make sure that your ticket actually gets prioritized. So be tactical, create a compelling layout of data and predictions, so whoever is doing the planning also buys into the importance of the work you've raised. We've spoken about adding metrics and data, so looking at what real numbers will be moved, reduced, or increased. Fine-tuning your ticket writing, so outlining the why and the why now, and also creating a compelling argument and putting in the work to improve the quality. So we're going to move on to talking about business risk. It's been mentioned a few times. It's a great form of value. So you need to think about what risks everyone actually cares about. Probably something affecting many customers not being able to pay or the site crashing are the risks the business actually cares about. Everything else is kind of a nice to have. And I find this is always a really difficult conversation within one-to-ones when people feel invested about some kind of risk that they think is really important, and you have to, encourage them to take a step back and think about other teams and the engineering team as a whole and the business as a whole. Think about what the actual tangible risks are that your business in particular cares about, because this is more examples of what we care about at Trinity London. And you should always bear that in mind when you think about or are unhappy about a tech debt ticket not being prioritised. It's a really great way to use risk to justify a ticket needing to be done right now rather than being delayed. Now, there is a spiritual experience here for engineers to step away from the tech debt tickets you've raised or any bugs. If they haven't been picked up yet, there's probably a reason for it. I found this really hard. I think probably because I'm really stubborn. When something that I was screaming about as being important was not picked up, I just thought that other people didn't understand. And I realised actually once my manager laid out the full landscape of all the priorities for the next 3 months, I realised, it wasn't important at all. And I think there's a part in there for engineers to basically take a step back and actually think about removing yourself from the full ownership and thinking that your the work you've raised is really precious. And basically, the cleanup of a discussing component probably isn't going to impact the greater company in a way that the work needs to be prioritized right now. So think about what can or can't happen if the ticket's done. What if it's not done in the next sprint or in the next month? Does it actually block any projects on the roadmap? And this is definitely the case when it comes to like bug tickets that are raised during incidents. I think in the pure panic of a P1 or a P2, extra bugs will be found, and everyone's looking at the logs like, what's going on here, what's going on? And they'll just raise these bug tickets, we'll deprioritize them, but they were identified during an incident, so you end up jumping on them immediately. But you do just need to take a step back, which is really hard during a P1 because everyone's heads are flying around. But if 2 customers were affected or 10 customers, is it really where your development team's time is best spent if it's a high complexity fix? And you need to help engineers understand like why that decision is being made. What's the point of fixing something for 2 customers or 10 customers if it's going to take the dev team like 2 weeks? A classic example is obviously refactoring. When you move fast with a lot of features, end up incurring a lot of tech debt because you may be patching over components that exist and then you've got a tight deadline. You need to make functional changes to the component, and you see code that hurts your eyes, but a PM will always tell you to just step over it. It's not for now, and you decide to raise a refactoring ticket and you add it into the backlog. After all, you're only here to do that feature work, and unless you've actually specified the business risk and value of that work, of basically not doing the cleanup, you might as well just say goodbye to that ticket forever. It will just fester in the bottomless pit that is the backlog. Again, maybe one day your PM will feel generous and you'll get a couple of days to work on it. But until then, it's not going to be looked at. So I think maybe instead of submitting that ticket, before submitting that ticket, think about what risk is posed by not doing the cleanup. So, are there no tests? Have you identified a scenario where tests will fail? Are tests being skipped? Make a compelling argument for why the ticket should be brought in or prioritized. And, if you can't reach a good argument, maybe actually it's just a nice to have ticket and doesn't necessarily need to be picked up now. And something that definitely works really well is having like big group discussions about tickets and actually having those discussions about implementation, but away from actually estimating and story points. So really thinking about the implementation, discussing as a team. We've spoken about thinking as the business, so thinking about the bigger picture, looking at the immediate risks of like questioning why something has been delayed and how many customers are currently affected, and looking ahead, so looking at what work will be or not be done if it isn't picked up. Bless you. So what to call it instead. We've obviously discussed a lot about value and risk, so let's bring it back to technical debt and what's next in terms of what to call it after you leave this room today. My suggestion is basically just to not have a bucket term at all. So just don't use something that's going to group up and generalize a bunch of tickets because they've been raised by engineers. I think for engineers, we talk about creating a compelling argument for the description. You can definitely do that for the title itself. I think often in backlog reviews and planning, it actually doesn't, unless someone actually clicks into the description of the ticket, it's never actually going to be seen. And so there's something there in terms of spending time on the title and making it tangible and creating a compelling one so that, it is highlighted in the backlog and it's not forgotten. So highlight the impacts and the value of the ticket in the title and make it stand out from all the other tickets in the backlog. Assume that if it's considered a technical improvement or tech debt, it's just not going to be picked up anytime soon. So give the ticket a specific and clear title, and basically one that's gripping enough to catch someone else's eye in the backlog. Think about how you're going to break up the ticket in bite-sized chunks, because obviously, whether we want to admit it or not, smaller delivery times will always make for a very tantalizing argument to pick up the ticket now. So I think we have 5 minutes left. So for the key takeaways, I thought I would put in a couple exercises that you can trial with your teams. So the first one is running a tech debt workshop. Start by having an open discussion and brainstorming what technical debt is and what the other names are for it. It's a great bonding opportunity for you and your team because the word tech debt gets thrown around all the time. Actually spend time to discuss what it means to everyone. And then get everyone to get into pairs and pick a ticket and answer the following questions. So, writing what is missing, what new title would you give the ticket, and get them to present it back to the room. And then finish the workshop with discussing and voting, which tickets are actually going to be picked up tomorrow by the team, and then the rest of them just delete them forever. The next one is a ticket template with questions. So you can trial this out by just adding it into the templates of whatever ticketing platform you use. And it's just a reminder for anyone raising tickets to ask these questions. But I think the slides will be sent around, so I think we maybe don't have that much time to go over the keys. Okay. But yeah, this is just a summary of everything that we've spoken about. So I guess some of the key points, calling it technical debt is lazy, and you're guilty of that now after this talk, so don't call it technical debt. Put more time into raising meaningful tickets. Part of retention and team success is helping people make an impact and influence the direction of the company. Engineering excellence is still very important, just sell it better, and never use the term tech debt again. But that's it from me. Please do add me on LinkedIn and come find me if you want to have a chat about anything. Thanks for coming. Oh yeah, and also, sorry, feedback cure.
We wrapped up really quickly, so we do still have a few minutes. So if anybody does have any questions, we can probably take 1 or 2 questions.
Hello.
I really liked your line that said engineering excellence is still important to sell it better.
Yeah.
Whose responsibility do you think it is to?
I think it's everyone's. Yeah, I really think it's everyone's. I think I've definitely seen in a lot of teams, engineers get really angry at product managers if they don't sell it better. But I don't think it's one person's responsibility. I think it's everyone's responsibility to buy into it.
That's what I'm wondering. Is it like the engineers who sell it to the product manager, or is it the product manager who has to go and sell it to the stakeholders?
Yeah.
That it's collaborative.
I think it's collaborative. I think often because of the setup in companies, PMs will naturally have more exposure to, conversations around projects planning and stakeholders in the rest of the company. Engineers often aren't actually in those conversations, but engineers have a responsibility to get the PMs to buy into it. Yeah. Hey.
Just align to that. You mentioned about the importance of OKRs and making sure that's communicated. But I've rarely seen engineering excellence as a company goal.
You should make it a company goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've made it a company goal. I think if you can align, we've made like engineering excellence and we have separate engineering OKRs, but I think that's come from engineering wanting to do that. And data have their separate OKRs literally in London as well because they wanted to push for that. So I think you have to remember to not split away your engineering team from like how the business is planning work. You can actually function in that way for your engineering team as well. Which is especially important for a company that isn't tech first, I think. Yeah. Good. Hey.
Just following up on that, I feel like we are, even as some of our best engineers, use that as like an emotional, we're going to fail an audit, or it won't be technically excellent, or we won't scale. So how do you hold those things in tension with the business values people?
Yeah, I think that's where, we spoke about stepping away and kind of that emotional attachment to that work. And I think if you all agree to play on the same level field of let's all agree that on what value means to us, so it might be towards the company metrics or towards your team goals. And I think it's more just about, leveling out what the agreement is in order for that work to actually be important to the whole team rather than to individuals. Saying that from a lot of experience of being the one shouting in the room that, refactoring the component I worked on is important. Thanks. Neha? Yeah.
That was really great, thank you. The refactoring one was actually quite interesting. impacts are important to capture. Like sometimes you can't capture metrics in terms of improvement. But I find like our engineers often struggle with that. So I was wondering if you have any guidance, if you have examples of like how you actually measure, like what needle is it that actually moves when you move back to certain parts of the code?
Yeah, of course. It's really difficult to quantify, right? I think it's difficult to quantify what the impact in terms of value is, but I think that's where like risk comes in really well. So, actually ask them like, how many errors have been happening in this area? Like, why does this particular component need refactoring? And think about like, okay, once you break out the ticket, it might be an entire part of the flow or entire feature. It might be 8 different components. So which of those components actually need to be refactored in order to address the risk? And I think if you can't actually show examples, you just have to step away. It's just not necessary for now. I mean, I wish, in an ideal world, we'd all have time to address technical debt and do all the refactoring we want, but it's not the reality. Yeah.